Hello, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Swenson Ridley. And today we're going to talk about something a little different from what I've shared on the show before. I don't often talk about that I am a homeschooling mom, like many of us. I got launched into that more so during the pandemic, though. If I look back, my son is now in fourth grade, and I think we've homeschooled more than he's actually gone to school at this point. And a lot of that has been due to that school has just always been a fight with him. It like hasn't felt safe for him, no matter, he's super social, super great. Just he's never enjoyed school. And even homeschooling, it's a constant daily struggle of him. He's a very good negotiator. So trying to negotiate his way out of doing anything related to schoolwork. So yesterday I walked in to check on him. I have breaks built into my day to just kind of check in and get us started on whatever the plan is for the day. And I walked into his room and was like mostly just checking to see if he wanted some food. And he goes, "Mom, it's time to do school," and proceeds to run upstairs to get started on school. And I was like, what? Just like, picking my jaw up off the floor 'cause I'm like, "What just happened?" And he's been having, he's 9.5, so he's been displaying these little moments of, like, fierce independence and taking, initiative in some things for himself that are actually good for himself, good for him for a change. So I came up and I just watched with amusement as, like, all of his good intentions to do school and sit down and do math just went out the window. He could not focus. He couldn't sit down. He, ended up on his hoverboard, and then he wanted to play with the dog, and then he needed a blanket, and then he needed a snack, and then he needed, like, all of this stuff just to avoid doing math. And it's not like he's not, doesn't have behavioral things. I wouldn't label him as anything. I don't think it's a label. What I was really clear on that it was, and I see this with every single one of us so often, is, like, he chose to act in a very different way from what he's used to, and then his system just freaked out by it and was like, "Oh, no. Well, no, we're not gonna voluntarily do school. What are you talking about?" And, how many of us have start our day with these great intentions or start our year or a month or a week, with big plans for either how we're gonna eat or, what our schedule's gonna be like or how we're gonna make time for ourselves or some project that we're gonna do in business or at work. And then it's like everything goes out the window, and all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, no, I need to wash the dishes first, or I need to do laundry, or I need to, this has to get done, and this just can't wait." And it's like we avoid the thing like the plague. And then we're blaming ourselves, we're beating ourselves up for self-sabotaging, or we feel like we don't have any motivation to do the things that we really should do. And I would argue that the bigger thing is that we are challenging ourselves to show up differently in our lives. That's what a lot of lifestyle change and, you know, forming new habits and a lot of the stuff that I coach women around daily is geared at. And we get confronted because there's a part of us that feels like that's not safe because it's new, it's the unknown. But growth also happens in the unknown. So I wanted to share, just kind of briefly, I'm starting to introduce some stuff I haven't really talked about a whole lot because it's all been coming together in my head. And as I've been writing the Selfless Syndrome book, which if you haven't picked up a pre-order copy of it, I'm actually someone called me very Emily Dickinson in doing this, but I'm releasing it like 1 to 2 chapters at a time, and the full thing will come out in January. So if you go ahead and pre-order, there's a link in the show notes. You'll get early access to it at like a digestible rate. So, you're just reading 1 or 2 chapters a week. And then you'll actually get the final product, which will probably be, edited and a little different than what's being pre-released, but you still get the bulk of the stuff early. Total side note there. Anyways, as I've been writing this book, a lot of the things that have kind of been rumbling around in my brain have started to come together. And one of them is really a methodology that I have found we have to really work through in order to find that get from wherever you're at in whatever area of life that isn't working as well as you want it to where you want to be. And, do it in a way that doesn't have you beating yourself up or depriving yourself or making yourself wrong or bad or feeling like it's all your fault. Like all of this stuff that we normally put into our space around this, and rather just, really observing and then getting to create who you actually want to be. And so what that process looks like, and again, I share the kind of funny story of my son watching him go through this yesterday, just because it's, I think a scenario that we can all relate to, but we forget that like we all have some like younger parts of ourselves that are still trying to run the show, right? And when we challenge them, which is a lot of times, making decisions to move away from something that they've always done for comfort, whether it's how we eat or, the way we approach a relationship or big decisions like that, they show up and they're like, yeah. And so I would really argue that they're the things that knock us back down and take us off our game because they don't feel safe. So how do we deal with this? That's the topic of today. And I've really come up with a process that has three pillars. The first one is what I call awaken. You can call it discovery. I have alliteration with this. They all start with A. So awaken is the word that I use. But it's really about bringing some curiosity to just yourself and what you're doing and observing your behavior and not attaching the story to it. A lot of where we get bogged down in staying stuck is that we are stuck in a story and making something mean something about ourselves that it really doesn't. There's just opportunity to learn something there. So, this is one of the first things that I have my clients work through is just observing themselves in, we generally pick an area that's not maybe working as well as they want it to. Because of my background in, chiropractic and then more functional medicine, a lot of times it has to do with food, but it doesn't have to be that. This applies to any area of our lives, right? And so just bring that curiosity and that observation and say like, how am I being about XYZ, whatever it is? It could be in business, it could be in leadership, it could be how you're eating, it could be losing weight. Like, how are you being? Are you frustrated and beating yourself up and, act, acting or feeling like a victim? These are all things that have come up for me before. Or are you being proactive and gentle and loving with yourself and kind and, not from a sense of giving up, but treating yourself well in the process. That's really important. So that's the first step. The second is to anchor. And what anchoring is it's getting really clear on not what the world says you should do, but in what your truth is in the sense of what is really your drive for achieving whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. Where does that come from? And what is your truth anchored in? For me, it's God and what God says about me. For others, it might be something completely different, but you want to get really clear on like, how do you decide what is true and not true in the world? And is that something that, is the input that you're getting something that you're okay with ultimately, or does that need to shift? And if so, like where are you looking for where your truth comes from? This is like these are some deep questions. Maybe pick out the journal and spend some time reflecting on these, especially going into the holiday. Hopefully we all have some downtime. You can reflect on some really deep questions. So that's the second part. And that can take a while, right? Like really getting anchored and grounded in what is our truth. This used to be a really small part of my process and program. Like the first module was like, hey, let's just do all these like really deep things. And I'm like, maybe we should spend some more time there because that's really where the shift happens. And I keep hearing from my clients because a lot of them are like me. We all are very driven. It's like we're highly intelligent, so we want to check the boxes, right? And they're like, okay, watch this module, do this thing. I have a lot that's built in an online platform, and then, we're meeting one on one as well, and in a group, and it's like they just want to tick the boxes. And the last handful of women that have actually started the process have actually restarted because they recognized that they were doing that and realized that that's how they've been doing life, and it hasn't gotten them anywhere. And so there's a lot of space and gratitude and grace, for themselves and just for the container of being having permission to slow down and really get clear on what it is that they really want to create and why and what the truth is that they want to anchor into and where that really comes from. So, these are big things. This is the overarching process. And then the third thing is what I call ascend. And this is where you really have spent the time cultivating, like becoming aware, having that curiosity, cultivating what your truth really is, getting clear on what it is that you really want. And then it's like the pieces finally come together. We spend I my big program that is a year long, I call it the chrysalis program because we're essentially putting you in a cocoon and letting you do your caterpillar thing and get all, get clear on all this stuff and really like anchor into who you truly are. And the ascension process is about launching into becoming, the butterfly. And so whatever that is going to look like for you, whether it's, your body and losing weight or it, changing career paths or jobs or getting reconnected to your passion and purpose, relationships being renewed. These are all things that I see happening for a lot of women that wouldn't be possible without going through this process. And it's one like we might keep repeating, but it gets easier over time because you get more and more clear on, what you're really anchoring to. And it becomes easier to observe yourself and not attach to the story. But it all takes practice. And we have to be willing to start somewhere. So, and circling this back to my son, like it could have been very easy to, be frustrated and get upset with him and be like, making him wrong or all this stuff for, he wanted to do the school and then he didn't, like he just couldn't, get himself to focus. And rather, I just met him where he was at and we got through school with like him half sitting on my lap, half running around and me typing in the answers that he, yelled at me because he's very brilliant and can just do large math equations and things in his head with no problem. So, like, that was what worked for us. And so it's about finding what works for you and not, there's a lot of I've recently been really reflecting on just I'm doing a lot of work and kind of trauma that comes from the patriarchal world that we live in, especially around business and around other things. And there's all these sayings, and I've honestly probably posted some of them at some point, that it's like, fake it till you make it, go big or go home. Like you got to just keep pushing, and eventually it'll all work out. And I don't really know who came up with that craziness because to me, all that means is like eventually you're going to burn out, right? Like that's, I'm still coming off of a place of just being freaking exhausted from, the first business I built, from like just never taking a break and not knowing how to rest. And even now, like I don't typically, because I can work from anywhere, I don't typically take time off when I'm, in California or, for holidays or vacations. Like I forgot to block my schedule for Black Friday this week. And normally I take it off because my husband's off. So it's those things don't necessarily serve us, right? Like there's permission that I feel like so many women that I work with need to just like say, it is okay to sit on the couch. And it's one thing if you're doing it to numb yourself to, avoid dealing with stuff. And it's another if it's truly something that's bringing you rest. And how I define rest, this actually came up on a call with a client last week. She was describing all these things that she's been doing and being like, I should feel rested, like if I'm watching Netflix or, reading or going, she rides horses, like going to ride horses. And we both finally got clear on it didn't feel like rest because internally it wasn't creating safety for her. And this is where, stress, trauma, all those things, it creates anything that makes us feel unsafe inside, like and safety can be not being able to just fully express who we are authentically and like be ourselves, like we're trying to fit into the mold of what someone else says we should be. Really common in business for women in leadership roles, hugely if you're in like a highly patriarch male dominated, we'll just say, arena or team or whatever. But it shows up everywhere. Like, someone's dictated what we're supposed to be like. And so it creates this lack of safety. And if we don't, where we get burnt out and, never feel rested and just hit the wall is when we haven't figured out how to create that safety for ourselves. And that's all part of this process of, giving ourselves permission to find that. And it's probably not in killing yourself at the gym or, massively restricting the foods that you eat or, taking on more at work because someday someone might notice. Like all of these things, those are just some of the common things that I hear a lot from women. Like they're not creating a safe space for us. And so, like, our number one job is to find that because we live in a high stress world that, quite honestly, like, we may not have threats like we used to of someone trying to, you know, kill us or like rape, plunder, and pillage, like all of the, things that we tend to associate more with trauma. For some of us, it might still be true, and that's something to be aware of. But for others, we can live in totally safe environments, but still be having that reaction of feeling unsafe. And a lot of things that we think are good for us are actually perpetuating that. So, all this to say, my challenge for you this week, especially going into the holidays, is to really pay attention to, how are you self-sabotaging, or where do you find you have a lack of motivation? And I challenge you to look at it differently as what about this doesn't feel safe to me? And what do I need to do to build safety? And, just observing what's your behavior. Don't attach any meaning to it. And, don't make it about you, but just kind of observe like, hey, why am I washing the dishes instead of writing the book I need to write? I've been running into this with writing. I got the preface and the first chapter out and published, and it's like pretty good. And then I've just been stuck on the second chapter, and I'm like, huh. So I'm just observing, like curiosity. Curiosity is the first step, and being like, okay, what's going on? Like, what am I feeling challenged by? And a few things have come up. Like, I'm trying to putting things in there that I feel like I should, right? And so that's like the big thing that I'm looking at. Like, what do I really need in here? Like, what's going to get the message across, and not, just be there because like I should because I have a doctorate degree and blah blah blah. So, um, random thoughts from Dr. Alex today. And yeah, so that's your challenge for this week. And then, the other thing I wanted to just offer you and invite, there's two of them actually. I have decided to launch what I love, like, I love showing up and having these conversations. I love the interviews that I do on my podcast. I freaking love the group calls that I do as part of my program, and I just love, bringing awesome women together and having really powerful, amazing conversations. So I decided I'm gonna do more of that, and I've, launched. I tried to do it really fast, and it's the week of Thanksgiving, so not many people were able to show up, but so we're gonna redo this topic. But I decided to, at least once a month, host something called a tea talk. If you want to find out about the tea talks, there's going to be a link to, you know, join the notification list for a tea talk. What a tea talk is a conversation that I will help facilitate, but it's not a webinar. It's nothing is for sale. It's not me, I may teach some stuff or give you some insight, but it's really about discussion and coming together and connecting with other women on similar journeys and similar paths, and just getting, a lot of times it's about validation and realizing you're not alone. Those are some of the common things I hear when I host group stuff, that make a really huge difference in just your experience of life and what you're up to and trying to create. So, if you would like more details on when we're going to have another one in early December, I need to nail down the exact date, but make sure you're on our mailing list for that. There's a link for that in the show notes as well. You can also just join the newsletter thing on the website emergentwomencoaching.com, and then you'll find out about that. And the other thing that is available to you is another, again, not a sales thing, not a anything. I have started doing what I call selfless syndrome breakthrough sessions. And I literally mean nothing is for sale in here. If it's a fit to talk about, potentially working together, we actually set up a totally different call for that from there. But what this is, it's free. There's no cost to it. There's a link in the show notes as well as a 20-minute call. And if you've been listening for a while, or you're feeling stuck, or you're still wrestling with some of the stuff that I talk about on here, because I talk about some deep stuff, this is an opportunity to just get some input from me on like what your next steps are and how you really move past and break through this thing called selfless syndrome, which I am going to talk about in more detail at some point, because really defining what it is has come out of writing this book as well. But that is also available to you. So, feel free to, I open my schedule about a week out on that, just, so we don't have months of time and space. But if you're in a place where you're really ready to take this a little further, and, like, that feels like a good safe, next step, knowing I'm not selling you anything on this. Please jump on my calendar. I would be more than happy to engage in conversation outside of me just sharing random musings from my brain with you on a podcast every week. So, both of those are available. They're in the show notes. Again, it's either joining the mailing list to find out about tea talks where, we're gonna come together in a group at least once a month and, like, all free. Like, you bring tea, you bring a cozy blanket, you can wear your fuzzy socks and pajamas. I probably will showing up for those, honestly. So, because that's how I'm most comfortable and just enjoy coming together and having conversation. So totally safe space. And then your other opportunity is to jump on a self-love syndrome breakthrough call with me and just get some support on your next steps. And I keep losing my voice, which I find very interesting. And again, observing. We're observing. If you take anything from this episode, it's observe. All right. With that, we will see you next week. Everyone who is in the US, I wish you a very happy Thanksgiving and time of gratitude and just joy and connection and whatever Thanksgiving means to you. And we will see you next week.